Hello everyone, this is James from 3D Printing Reviews again, and welcome to part 2 of the Printrbot Metal Plus modifications and upgrades series. So in this, or in the previous video, we looked at more add-ons that you can add to the structure of the printer to make it either more stable or to add more functionality. In this episode of the series, we're going to look at the hot end and actually completely changing the whole extruder, hot end, and in some sense the carriage that all rides on. So as you remember in the last video, we looked at two designs. This one here by Tom114, and let's just have a look at that in more detail. And that basically replicates the Prusa i3 Mark II assembly. And as I said in my previous video, it was between this and the one by Spannerhands. So if we have a look at this one, so this one basically involves actually modifying a piece of the bracket that this all sits on. This is to use the E3D Titan and the V6 hot end, though I'm using a clone Titan for my printer. So yeah, so in the last video I said that I was going to, I've got both these designs printed out and I was going to have a look and see how they fit on the printer. Well, as it turns out, unfortunately, this design by Tom114 won't fit on my printer, and that is because, and I think this is where Richard from Spannerhands went with his design, the bracket that holds the hot end, the stepper driver and the extruder also holds the bed probe. And that bed probe basically comes out on a small arm and then obviously probes the bed. This gets in the way of putting the E3D V6 into the Titan extruder if you don't modify anything. So unfortunately we can't use this design. I thought it was really a clever design and did want to use it. Maybe we'll use it in the future for something else, but unfortunately we can't use it today. So if we go back to this one from Spannerhands, what this basically involves us doing is modifying the bracket here by cutting the bit off that holds the probe. And then Richard's design, you can't really see it very clearly in that picture, but it shifts over the bracket or the part that holds the probe, so it allows you to insert the V6 into the Titan extruder. So yeah, there's really nothing more to do now than to go and disassemble the printer, which I've got a short video and I'm about to show you, and go and cut this piece of the bracket off basically. So yeah, I'm now going to show you a small piece of video where I show you how the Titan, or my Titan clone, fits onto the extruder or the extruder bracket, and the problem we have. So yeah, go and check out that small clip of the video and we'll be back. Okay, as you can see, I've fitted the Titan extruder here. It's just held on with one screw, two screws at the moment, just to hold it in place and to show you. Obviously what I said I was going to do in the previous video was just to have a look and see which design that I had chosen would fit. So I've just mocked this up without having cut the bracket yet. And it's a good job I did it's a good job I did this test, because I actually have found out that basically I can't use the alternate design to Spannerhands design. And if I just get the hot end and put it in there, you can see that it actually hits on this bracket here. So it physically cannot fit into the Titan extruder. So that's pretty much made up my mind that I've got to go with the design from Spanner Hands. So the next job will be to cut this whole, so this whole bracket is one piece here, all the way around here. So the next job, get this off and do some cutting. Okay, so you've watched the previous little clip there, and you can see what I mean about the hot end. So the heatsink of the hot end not actually physically fitting properly into the Titan extruder clone with the original bracket here. So I've just disassembled the bracket itself, so that would sort of, from your perspective, would go into the machine like that, and this is the front, and here's the probe bracket. So what I've got to do is basically cut the bracket off there. So as you can see in Richard's picture, or Spanner Hands' picture, you can see where he's cut that. What I actually plan to do is cut it back a little bit further and then round the corners off, just so it looks like it potentially was never there, if that makes sense. Now obviously there's a little warning here. If you've got a Printerbot Metal Plus and you plan to do this mod, this stage cannot really be undone. You can't, I mean, you might you would probably get a replacement bracket from Printerbot potentially, but you're not going to be able to reattach this part that we cut off. So yeah, so that's just a little warning to you if you do decide to do this mod. Obviously come and read the thing page that Richard has set up. It tells you all the hardware you need, the fan specifications, etc. And he's also linked to my previous video, so you can go and have a watch of that. So yeah, so I'm going to mark this up and then go and cut it. So I'll be back in a second. Okay, so hello everyone. As you can see here, I've cut the bracket now. So basically it's cut this part off here, and here's the part that's been cut off. If you can see that, just if I can, there we go. So basically you keep this part and it gets used as a spacer here when we put the bottom part of the print on. So I just wanted to show you that the bracket's been cut, and I've reinstalled it onto the printer, adjusted the belt, and that moves fine. So I'll continue with the installation of the bracket. Okay, so as you can see, I've finished the installation of the E3D V6 and the Titan clone that I got from AliExpress with Spanner Hands bracket. Everything looks fine. It's now about calibrating the Z height and updating the firmware. So that's the next step, and I'll come back once I'm at the stage I can show you flashing the firmware. Okay, so here we are, ready to start doing something with the firmware. As you can see, I've laid the Printerbot Metal Plus on its side and took the bottom plate off, which allows us to access the control board. Now if I just switch this over to manual and zoom in a bit, if I can zoom in and show you here, I am running a Revision F5 board. Okay, so that's important to make sure that you're running, or to know what board you're running. Now on my board, on my printer previously, I had the dual extruder set up. So this board that you can see here possibly won't be in your printer, but if it was, or if it is, you will have 2 fans going in your wire loom, which helps us greatly here because we're going to need 2 fans. One for the heatsink for the hot end, and then obviously the part cooling fan. So I'm just going to discuss how to wire those 2 fans. So if we go up the top here, let me zoom, you can see this connector here is the fan connector for the board. This fan will want to be your part cooling fan, So in our case, the blower fan that's on the bottom of the bracket. And then if you have a second fan, which will be the heatsink fan, you need to wire this up to this connector here, which is our hot end connector. You wire the 12 volt line into that connector, and on the picture you can see here it's the second red wire closest to the middle. The ground for that fan goes up here to the IC, just have a look for myself, ICSP connector. So that's the ground for that fan. So with those connections done, you're good for fan and part cooling fan. The next thing to do for this particular board is to take, if I can show it to you, there's a small jumper right there. You can take that off with no power applied, not connected to anything, and then you need to ground the two boot pins which are there. Okay, now once that's done, you would connect the power, turn it on, connect the USB and plug that into your PC. What you would then do is press the reset button, which is up there, and once you do that, the PC will recognise it as a different device. So now we're at that stage, I will head over to the PC and show you what we do from there. Okay, so once we've made those connections and modifications on the hardware side of the board, you would then go over to the PC side. So what you would do, and actually Printrbot have actually got quite a good guide on how to flash the firmware, so we'll just go through what they tell us to do. So this describes the process for doing the Revision F5 board, which is what we have, and for instructions for the Mac and other boards you'd go to this link here, but we're fine, so we can carry on. So we would require to download this file, which is an Atmel tool, and it's called Flip, and it basically allows us to flash the board. Because the printed board, though it's an Arduino based board, it doesn't work in a similar way to the Ramps board, for example, where you can just load up the Arduino IDE and just flash the firmware straight to the board. What we have to do is actually flash a hex file. Now I'm not going to describe how to get the firmware that I'm using, because obviously my printer is going to be completely unique in the sense that it's got the Titan extruder, the E3D V6, etc. But basically, once you have that hex file that you need, you'd then be ready to go. So we'll go on to the next step, and this just talks about what we've just done here. So we've took a jumper and we've shorted the boot pins. So yeah, you do that, and we are fortunate enough to have that jumper on the board that we can just use and put there. So you do that, like I said, power up the board, connect it to the PC, and then press the reset button, and then this then shows under control panel this device. We'd right click on that and basically select to update the driver, browse to the Flip folder that we had previously installed, select the USB folder, and then that will put in the correct driver for what we're going to do. That's basically what this is telling you. Once that's done, you're ready to open the Flip. So let me do that myself. So if we go here, basically what we would do is here we would select what we want, and it's auto selected for me because I've actually already done this. So we'd click OK. We would then click USB and open. Now this is not going to work because I haven't actually got it connected, but if you did, that would basically say yeah, that's fine, and that would sort of allow you to access the rest of the screen. So what that would allow you to do is actually load your hex file. So you'd click on this button here, browse to where you have that hex file, they recommend just having it on the desktop so it's easy to get to, which would then populate the hex file name here. What you have to do is make sure that you tick every one of these boxes. Okay, so you tick every one of those boxes, make sure you've got the correct file here, and click run. And basically what that will do, if we go to load hex, run boot, or press the run button, basically what this will do is go through that process here. So it will raise it, do a check to make sure it's blank, program it, and then verify that it's actually done what you asked it to do. And what you would then do is, well, what I would do is then power off the printer. So just turn off the main ATX power supply, and you're basically now done with the flashing process. So you would then remove the pin that you had on the boot pins and put that back to where it was on the revision 5 F board, which is, it says here, on the middle and bottom HV pins. Then what you would do is then leave the printer for 5 minutes. There's no, I don't know why that is, but that's fine, you can leave it, you can put the base plate back on, whatever you'd like to do. Basically you are then done. You then power up your piece, the printer itself, and it's then time to reinsert your settings. Now for what if you were following along and you're going to do this mod, the firmware has basically, or the firmware that you would want if you get hold of it, basically needs to change the thermistor that the board uses or board sees, because the one that the PrinterBot UBIS 13 and the ceramic ones use is different to this one. And that then would be a case of changing the steps per millimeter. So what you would do is go into Cura or whatever slice program you have. You'd go to the command prompt and then you would just type in M92E and then the steps that you're going to use. Now I haven't got the page open, I don't believe. No. So if you was to go into E3D's website, because the Titan extruder is a known gearing, they actually give you the steps per millimeter you would need to enter. And that's basically it, really. So that's the flashing side of it done. Now, if you've done anything with your printer before, it's then a matter of calibrating your Z probe, which is very important because you don't want to start using the printer again now with any settings you've had before, because the hot end is actually physically a different size. So the procedure that I use for doing that is to lower the Z height down, and be very careful with this. Don't do it in too big of steps. Basically get that as close to the bed as you can, and then do very small steps until the nozzle is literally just touching the bed. And then what you want to do is the Z probe, you would then, let's just think if I can find you a picture. Not this right moment, I can't, but basically what that will do, so you'd undo the Z probe and you'd actually lower that down to the bed, and then if you've kept it, you'll have a 3mm spacer that PrinterBot originally sent you, and you want to put that under the probe. So that's the bed with the plastic shim. Put the probe onto the bed, tighten it up so that is just loose underneath, and then that should be your calibration start point. You then want your offset to be 0, and then you basically dial that in until your first layer goes down as you wish. So that is basically it for what we're going to do today. We've fitted the new bracket, and we've flashed the firmware to know that we're now using a different hot end. So that is basically it. It's now a matter of tuning everything in to make sure everything works properly and getting the first layer that you really want. So yeah, that's it for today's video. If you have any questions, please put them down in the comments section. Please consider leaving a like and subscribe if you haven't already. And also check out my previous video, which is a thank you to my subscribers and the announcement of the giveaway. So I'm giving away some filament or the opportunity to have a 3D print done by me on my printer. So yeah, thanks for watching. Until next time, keep on printing.